All right. So Daniel, non-hand thing, right?
Correct.
Okay. So what's your question?
So I emailed you with a question about actually including poker experience and history in a resume. I'm a junior in college studying industrial engineering,
Yep.
so it's coming the time for me to start applying for internships.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was cleaning up with my resume, I kind of realized that most of my resume was just like smaller jobs that I've worked throughout high school and college, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't
Mm-hmm.
feel like that kind of stuff held much value to an employer.
Uh-huh.
And throughout, I mean, the past few years or so, I've spent tons of time playing, studying, reviewing hands,
Right.
and getting all the benefits of learning this kind of stuff
Mm-hmm.
throughout my life. And I feel like that's something that would stand out in a resume, but I felt it's also something that's very difficult to include without.
Some explanation behind it, maybe.
Right.
Well,
Right. And I feel that poker is also something that doesn't necessarily have a positive reputation to people outside of it.
so let me ask you the question. Well, so let me ask you a question. So you say you're applying for internships. What is this after your senior year, basically, right? When you graduate, or between the summertime into your senior year?
After my junior year, yes. So
Yeah.
the summer before my
Okay.
senior year.
So what are you applying to? Engineering firms? Like what kind of internships are you applying to?
Correct. Yeah. Within the industrial engineering.
Industrial engineering. So that's that. I'm not super familiar with that field, industrial engineering. What I would say, like if you were saying like, yeah, I'm applying to some sort of finance internship, having to do with, possibly trading or working at even necessarily like an accounting firm. I know I would absolutely include it in that field for sure. And I know that it does sort of require a little bit of an explanation, but I don't think that there's anything wrong if you do decide to include something like that. To just write, I mean, obviously I haven't made a resume in like forever, but you can add just a little thing. I'm not talking about making the resume long, but you could, put in bold, please ask for explanation. Something that highlights, hey, professional poker player would be happy to explain, and then I don't know if you get to do a little bit of a summary. Like, I think that this adds to my value, because I think it certainly does, but it does obviously need an explanation behind it. What exactly is industrial engineering?
There's a lot of like data analytics and
Okay.
like stuff like that in it. So
Well, then
that's kind of where.
then I think that depending on, I mean, here's the thing. Also, too, like, because I'm not overly familiar with the field, so a couple things coming off the top of my head. Like when you apply to an industrial engineering firm, or the person that's doing the hiring, like for the internship, is it an HR person that knows nothing about the field? Or is it an industrial engineer that's sort of in management?
Well, I guess there's definitely there's a lot of ways to go with industrial engineering, and I'm going to be applying to like a wide variety of internships.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I would say that like a lot of the stuff that I wanted to include, relating to poker, aside from just like the math and problem solving and stuff like that, was just like I felt that would better display like the lessons I learned as far as like thinking logically and self-discipline and time management and like managing yourself, as opposed to saying that after school I had refereed a couple soccer games or something like that.
Did you referee soccer games, by the way? Because I used to as well. That's how I made a lot of money when I was in college and high school, baseball umpiring, basketball and stuff like that. No, I tend to agree. It's an interesting call, because what I would say is that I don't know how competitive it is to get interviews specifically in this field. So I would definitely, when you do get an interview, I would definitely try to bring it up in an interview. Whether or not you want to include it as a line item on a resume, I think for this particular one, it's probably a little bit close. You might actually have to do more research specifically and possibly include it on resumes to certain companies and not on others, with the variable of who's actually doing the hiring for your internship. If you can find that out, like, is there an HR department? Is it a big company with an HR department? Does this company, so let's say that it is, trying to do your own research about like, is the HR department entirely independent, the one that's going to be reviewing it? Because if that's the case, then it might be a negative. Whereas if maybe you're interviewing more of a boutique firm where you think that somebody in analytics is actually going to be looking at your resume, then it could stand out, right? But I would try to bring it up. I would try to bring it up in an interview, but you'd have to gauge the situation though in the interview too, with the same type of sort of filtering. Like, am I talking to an HR person, or am I talking to somebody that is actually making the decision making, that has an experience in analytics? Obviously, sometimes it's going to be hard to know, right, who that person is, in the back. I mean, I come from a standpoint, and I don't know if say professional HR people think about this in this way, but whenever people ask me about college nowadays, now I'm not obviously like reading resumes and taking resumes, but like I've always said now, and I went to private school, I went to private college, I went to Syracuse, right? I mean, back then it was only 29,000 as opposed to whatever it is now, 70. But the GTO way really to do higher education, it quite possibly you are in an exception, because you are actually in a specialized field where you're learning a skill that can come out at the bachelor's degree level, at the 4-year degree level, and actually like go right out into the workforce and actually have a valid skill, right? Like in engineering, that might be, one of the few exceptions. But in terms of like, if somebody didn't know what they were doing like a liberal arts degree or whatever, even finance, whatever it is, I did like broadcasting, the GTO way to attack higher education is to go to community college for 2 years, get your prerequisites out of the way, and then transfer to the best public school in your state. Now, obviously, it's a little bit of a luck of the draw where you live. Like, if you lived in California, it would be unbelievable if you had the grades to get into Berkeley. UT, down the street from me here in Austin, there are some state schools that are better than others, but mostly, especially at the local level, if you go to the best public school in your state, that is going to be well respected. And I would say it could be 100% of the states in the union have direct programs that allow you to do this, where they might even they might even give people who are coming out of community college preferential treatment for admittance as like an interstate type of transfer from community college to the public school. The reason why I bring that up is that if I was an employer and I saw somebody, let's say I lived in California and I saw some kid like went to LA County Community College for 2 years and then graduated from Berkeley or graduated from UCLA and had like decent grades, I would be extremely impressed. I would want that guy. Especially if I was hiring for something in finance, it would be the first thing that I would ask. I would say, why did you go to community college the first 2 years? And he could give a response that was, I went there because it was the best financial decision. I didn't want to be riddled with debt. And I knew that I could get the prerequisites out of the way. And it just, it made the most sense. That would be a top candidate for me. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, it doesn't necessarily roll into what your particular situation, but I think you need to gauge who the hirers are. I think that it can be a positive. It might also be a negative if you're going straight into corporate, like dealing with a corporate HR type of person,
Yeah, absolutely. I think you bring up a good point before talking about the whole community college thing when you said asking for some sort of explanation, because the wording is so tricky. Is what I struggled with when I was trying to include something like that. I felt you only get a couple lines to,
right.
There's only so much space in my resume to put that in, and
right.
The wording has to be perfect.
Well, obviously, and you have to be, and you need to choose the words wisely as to, it's not just, oh, I play poker tournaments, ha ha ha, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, right. why are you putting this in? How does it lend into your field? Like, if it was finance, I would highlight it because of like the quantitative, analytics, and that it has a direct parallel. Especially if it was some sort of like trading internship or something like that, making decisions based upon equity. I don't know if there's that parallel in your field. Like I said, I'm not super familiar with it, but that's what you want to really to go with. Like do the research on the firms you're applying to, find out who is going to try to do your best to find out who actually is going to have the first look at the resumes. Maybe it'll be worth it. Maybe it won't. If you leave it off, you're going to make a split second. You're going to make that decision when you get an interview. If you get an interview at a place where you've left it off, you're also going to make that decision at the time whether or not you want to bring it up. So I appreciate the call. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Bart. Appreciate it.
All right. So that's always fun to do non-hand calls. But I do strongly feel that definitely is the best way to go nowadays, for sure, when most 4-year degrees don't mean anything. Now, with this guy's case, he has a degree that actually, I would say, one of the few fields coming out as 4 years where, okay, this is a profession, but I don't know, 80, 90% of 4-year bachelor degrees mean absolutely nothing. And you see these people even go to some of the better private schools. Like once you get out of like maybe the top 5 or 10, like Ivies and, like Stanfords and stuff like that, where it's mostly alumni connections anyways. Like even if you're going to like even a top tier private school like I did or whatever, like, a top 40 school. And now you're sitting there with $350,000 in debt after 4 years with like an English degree. And you're struggling to and you get hired for like a $55,000 a year job. I mean, that's like indentured servitude. You're going to be riddled with debt the rest of your life. There's just no point. If you want to spend money on higher education, on those types of non-specialized fields, all that matters is the graduate level. So you'd spend money at the graduate level. Don't fucking do it for undergrad. That's for sure.